Baby, please come home.
Come on, man, let's rock it. The snow's coming down.
Welcome one and all back to Patrick Smith's Christmas Treat. I, of course, am your host and curator around these parts, Patrick Smith, and tonight we have something that a little bit different for you. Technically speaking, this episode came out a while ago, December of 2021 to be precise. But it only was released for our live club members, the people who show up on a weekly basis to see the show as it happens and unfurls live. Which means that no one's ever seen this before other than a small subset of people. So technically speaking, this isn't a rewind episode. But because it's on the old set, I needed to explain why that is. Because in a previous episode, I've already talked about the fact that the desk has been replaced, we're rebuilding the set, and which is why I'm over here. So the fact that you're about to see the old desk, well, that's why. Because tonight we're diving into the 1984 family horror holiday classic, Gremlins. This is a film that is near and dear to my heart. I adore this film, if you can't tell from all kinds of stuff right in here. And recently I had the chance to go see this film with a live audience at Sidewalk Film Center and Cinema. And in attendance was actor Zach Galligan, who's the star of the picture, if you don't count, Gizmo. Of course, you can see this signed memorabilia over here from an afterwards signing. Galligan also did an incredible Q&A. It was extremely personable and was telling amazing stories from the set of this holiday classic. There's a reason that a film like this has so much magic. And in large part, I think it is the brilliant script from Chris Columbus, as well as the incredible direction from one of my favorite directors, Joe Dante. While Dante has directed a wide variety of movies, I think he feels most at home in creature features, because he got his start in, Piranha? While that film is absolutely not set at the winter, what I love about it is just how fun it is. It's very much a summer movie, but it's still very funny and goofy and kind of a little bit like a cartoon. Though I think Piranha does play it a lot more seriously than this movie does. What I think sets Gremlins apart from so many of its other counterparts is that, at the end of the day, it's still pretty darn wholesome. It's very cute, it's very adorable, it plays like a live-action cartoon most of the time. It's got this weird, 50s creature feature imagination that really plays super well. It's a film that, on paper, shouldn't work, but is so fun because of the cast that's all in, including Galligan and, of course, Phoebe Cates, who I can't help but mention here because of her amazing monologue right at the start of the third act. It's a huge dramatic turn from someone who isn't typically known for that, but it really, I think, once again, is one of the things that sets this movie apart. It can be campy, it can be silly, it can be incredibly fun and stylistic, but there's a lot of substance underneath the surface, and I think that's what sets the film apart. It's able to juggle tone quite handily, and I think a large part of that is, due to Joe Dante and his amazing work behind the scenes. But you don't want to hear me rambling on for a long time before you hear me rambling on for a longer time. You just want me to get out of the way so that way we can watch the actual episode I prepared for you. So I'm going to do just that. Like I said, since this isn't a rewind episode, since technically this show has never been aired before, you're about to see a brand new episode to you, and I think you're going to love it. So without further ado, we here at Patrick Smith's Christmas Treat are so proud to present to you the 1984 family horror classic from director Joe Dante and writer Chris Columbus. This is Gremlins. Oh, and of course, I've been your host and curator around these parts, Patrick Smith, and this has been Patrick Smith's Christmas Treat. I'll see you all at the movies.
Steven Spielberg, creator of the lovable E.T., has done it again. For the first time on home video, the mischievous and bizarre comedy Gremlins. Bring one home, but never get them wet, and never feed them after midnight. If you do, you're in for it. Gremlins, they'll be expecting you. And while you're there, look out for summer craziness in Fandango, another great movie from Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainments. Gremlins, the video cassette of the year, and Fandango from your local video outlet.
There is a creature unlike anything you've ever seen before. But a word of warning. Never get him wet. Keep him out of bright light, especially sunlight. It'll kill him. But the most important thing, the thing you must never forget, no matter how much he cries, no matter how much he begs, never feed him after midnight.
Oh, Mom's gonna kill us.
Steven Spielberg will introduce you to Gremlins.
Welcome one and all back to Movie Club. I'm delighted you've elected to join us yet again, specifically during this happy holiday season. Now, as you can tell, my co-host Kevin over here is planning on going home to see his family for the holidays, so I would recommend, doing so safely if you can. But regardless, thank you for joining me yet again for another ride through movies that are only tangentially Christmas movies, but in my heart, they are the better Christmas movies, so they're the only ones we're ever going to cover, so just get over it. If you're ever thinking we're ever going to cover that movie with Tim Allen becoming Santa, it's not going to happen. Just go find someone else to host your show then. To kick off this holiday season here at Movie Club, I've decided to take us through one of my favorite holiday treats every single year, the one that my family only begrudgingly watches with me because, I hold them all hostage and force them to watch the movies that I want to watch because I'm a terrible person. Not because they want to watch the Santa Claus 3 with frickin' Martin Short playing Jack Frost for a paycheck. Just, please, let's watch something decent for once. I think the thing that attracts me the most to Gremlins, besides its really fun atmosphere and being kind of a horror comedy holiday hybrid, it's just I really love the characters, and I think that comes from Steven Spielberg's hands all over this project, being one of the executive producers, but also Joe Dante's approach to genre. Joe Dante is without a doubt one of my favorite directors, both in horror and in general, but this man has made quite a few amazing films, so let's just dive into just a couple of them tonight. Dante got his start in the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking, which was fast, cheap, and sleazy. And because of that, Dante's already one of my favorite filmmakers because, let's face it, Corman is just so good. Let's just face it, as weird and as sleazy as Corman's movies can be, they're a lot of fun. And so it makes so much sense that Dante's first feature film, at least solo, would be the Jaws knockoff Piranha. And as I mentioned before, all of human history and all of art history is all about knocking off things that came before and making your own spin on it. And realistically, what matters is you take the things that work in the original and that's what you rip off, and you leave the stuff that didn't work behind. That's why, all the other shark movies that we don't want to think about, or even, let's admit, the Jaws sequels, are terrible. While Piranha isn't an excellent film, it starts to show kind of the humor side that Dante sees within this genre, and does a pretty good job at both occasionally scaring you and making you laugh at the kind of absurdity of it all. And while Piranha isn't the film I would recommend to people who are not familiar with Dante, it's a great starting point to kind of jump into his work. But it's not the one that I would recommend right off the bat. In 1981, Dante would return to the horror genre with his classic film, The Howling, an update of, I think, one of the best and most underutilized subgenres in horror, the werewolf film. Now, werewolf films are few and far between, and even when they come, they're often not very good. And it's kind of incredible that we suck at making these movies because these creatures are so interesting. You would think that we would have figured it out by now, but realistically we haven't. But luckily, Dante's film in 1981, The Howling, is one of those exceptions. It's delightfully fun, it has a playful atmosphere, but also goes to great effects to utilize its special effects to terrify you. That, and it also has one of the stalwarts of the horror genre, Dee Wallace, who is, without a doubt, one of the best actors working in this genre. After teaming up with Spielberg to co-direct the Twilight Zone movie, in 1984, he would team up with Spielberg yet again to make something really funny, but also with a lot of gallows humor, and that is the subject of tonight's episode of Movie Club, Gremlins.
And I think if I had to like pinpoint the thing that draws me to this the most, it's obviously the fact that it's a 1980s horror film, so it utilizes a lot of amazing practical effects, combining stop motion, puppetry, animatronics, and so much more to create a film that truly is magical and stands the test of time. That, and combining it with the fantastic score by veteran horror composer Jerry Goldsmith, and you've really got the makings of something special. For now, let's just discuss the writer of this piece, Chris Columbus. And I know what you're thinking, it's not the awful, awful human being that's definitely rotting in hell who discovered America and raped and pillaged all the Native Americans in society that existed at the time. No, we're talking about the one that wrote and directed the first 2 Harry Potter films. So he's kind of still at least a little bit nicer than that guy. But on the downside of Chris Columbus, he did also make that Percy Jackson movie, and that's a cardinal sin. I'll never forgive him for that. But he did write Gremlins, so maybe there's some sort of absolution in purgatory. I don't know, man. Regardless, the script combines a pre-existing cartoon character from a strip that definitely wasn't as like downright evil as what we see now, but the thing about Gremlins is that it truly balances that original creature that we see, the Mogwai, who's peaceful and calm, and there's only a couple rules you have to follow to be responsible for it and to not kill it.
You know the rules? What rules?
Which, of course, in any movie that sets up the rules, people are going to break them. Specifically in a horror movie, it's like, hey, here's a list of rules. If you don't do this, bad things are going to happen. You can rest assured that, bad things are going to happen because human's gonna human.
Jesus Christ, you don't know the rules?
Have an aneurysm, why don't you?
There are certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie.
It certainly is not a horror film.
But what truly makes this film, I think, is its fantastic cast that brings together the story that is both bittersweet and comical and fun, but also downright dark at times. I remember being traumatized when I got this from Blockbuster as a kid, specifically at a scene where an old lady is ejected out a window by some gremlins who are wreaking havoc in her house. As a kid, I was like, that's awful, I feel so terrible for that lady. And as an adult, my feelings have changed, and I hate that woman with every fiber of my being, and I'm glad that she's dead. I said it, I'm fine with that being on record, I'm okay with it. But this film isn't just, Christmas in setting, like it truly has the vibe of a classic Christmas parable. And in fact, not only is there this motif of It's a Wonderful Life and its kind of plot functioning throughout this film, it is literally referenced and seen on camera multiple times throughout this movie. It's a Wonderful Life, as we discussed last year, is also a Christmas movie that truly, I think, deals with some of the harder things about this season, some of the darker elements that, some people are just not happy at the holidays. And you know what? That's okay.
While everybody else is opening up their presents, they're opening up their wrists.
And it's surprising that a film that is supposedly so wholesome and coming from a director who's, in a producing role here, that is known for his wholesome family fare, it's interesting to see the fact that it's willing to delve into this darker territory, to discuss some really sad things, but do so in a way that is never undercut by, the comedy in this film. It takes a lot of talent, and I think Joe Dante shows a lot of restraint where other filmmakers would have just been like, whatever, we'll do whatever we want to. That's saved for Gremlins 2. We're not talking about that movie tonight, and we're definitely not covering it tonight, but good God almighty, that movie's amazing, and I'm so glad it exists. For a little bit of context, the first time I watched this movie, I rented it on VHS from a local Blockbuster, and we took it to the school that my mom taught at, and I watched it after school with my friend and co-creator of Movie Club, Kent, and we watched it we wheeled in one of those like TVs from the library and just popped in this VHS, and we'd only be able to watch so much every afternoon after school ended, and then we'd have to go home. So we had to watch the movie in segments. And I still remember viscerally like getting to that swimming pool scene and being like, I don't want to go home, I want to finish this movie. But I still have fond feelings, and I remember that time fondly because it was just such a fun movie, and it was so fun to watch with friends in that way, that it still holds, like I know somewhere deep down in the recesses of my brain that will be one of the last things to go when inevitably my brain starts to delete all my memories. It's gonna be alright, but that one will stick around for a long time. That and the call Goldberg 800-600-6014, that number's never leaving my brain. And I think because of how good the characters are, this movie is able to kind of fluctuate between the multiple different like identities it's holding, comedy, horror, a bit of a sci-fi film, and very much, still a holiday picture with that morality tale. I think because of that, it's able to fluctuate between all these different things because of the power of the amazing character actors behind it. I have to talk about Zach Galligan's Billy, because him and his family are both eccentric, but also extremely fun to watch. His dad is an inventor, played by Hoyt Axton, and his inventions often work pretty well to begin with, but eventually go haywire. I think one of the other things that this film does is, through the examination of Billy and his family, the Peltzers, we get to kind of see this almost class warfare discussion start up in the middle of this film. I mean, this is another instance where, because of Miss Deagle having this kind of stranglehold financially over the town and living in relative luxury, like Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life, there's kind of this feeling that, the Peltzers are struggling, and there are other people that are struggling in this town, and it's not really ever played as a joke. And I think that's what makes this movie so fun to return to, is you see a lot of the emotional maturity. I do think the Peltzers are a fun way to see it, is the dad really believes in his dreams and believes in his son, but there's some struggle, and I think that's what makes it so heartwarming to see how much they love each other and care for each other. And it's what makes you really resonate with Billy. The first time we meet him, his car's broken down and he's late for work. It's a great way to introduce this character who has this kind of financial struggle and, doesn't have the comfortability that someone like Miss Deagle has to, mess things up. He really has to stay on top of things, otherwise the, sheltered world that he's had his entire life is going to come crumbling down. Of course, it's an 80s horror film with the sentimental overtones of Spielberg, so it would be it would be out of the question to not have a love interest here, and that is Kate, played by the fantastic Phoebe Cates. Now, if you're an adolescent who either grew up in the 80s or watched a lot of movies like I did from the 80s as a kid, you know who Phoebe Cates is. Here she's playing kind of a much more down-to-earth, normal girl, like the girl next door, that Billy's definitely interested in, works at the same place as. But in most of her movies, she is the conventionally attractive, first crush character that was quintessential in the 80s. Without a doubt, she is, if you had to ask your parents if they were adolescents in the 80s, some of them would probably answer that Phoebe Cates was their first, celebrity crush. And there's good reason, but I've always known her from Gremlins, and so that was my version of Phoebe Cates before I realized, oh, she's that girl in Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And sadly, because she was so typecast for such a long time, she hasn't been doing a whole lot of acting since the turn of the millennium. And I think that's a tragedy, because when she does actually get to act, she's very good. And in fact, there's a scene in here that is so quintessential to making Gremlins work and is really the emotional heft of this film that I think without her powerful performance in that scene, it would fall apart. Of course, it's also an 80s movie, so you have to have your Corey Feldman, who this year was not only in this movie, but also hanging out at Camp Crystal Lake and almost getting murdered by, a strange guy in a hockey mask who has a weird obsession with his mother. But at this point, this is pre-Goonies, pre-Lost Boys, pre-Stand By Me, so he hasn't quite become the name, the household name that he will be eventually. But this is one of his first roles, and he does play a pretty minor role here as kind of a comic relief guy, but it's at least fun to see him starting to get his chops here. It also would literally not be a Joe Dante movie if the fantastic character actor Dick Miller didn't show up. Now, Dick Miller was quintessential to not just horror in the 80s, but lots of films in the 80s, and has been in a wide variety of films across his career. And while he didn't get to be a leading man very often, he did play a fantastic leading man in A Bucket of Blood, another Roger Corman flick. When Dick Miller shows up on screen, you know you're gonna have a good time. Even if the movie sucks, he's gonna bring so much to that moment that he's on screen. He just chews up every second he gets to have. And as Mr. Futterman in this film, he eats scenery. He's so much fun and so funny to watch. And that's just who Dick Miller was. And it's genuinely a tragedy that Miller passed away in 2019, and we won't get to keep seeing him on our screens on occasion, specifically in genre films like this. He's a part of one of my favorite moments in a cult movie that Gavin and I both love, Chopping Mall, and he's just such a funny guy. He's just this cranky old guy in every movie he's ever been in, and he's just so fun to watch. And I know he's playing the hits here, but it's so good. And yeah, it's nice to see that he had like this consistent working relationship with Joe Dante and would show up in a wide variety of roles all the time. Because it's always nice to see like a director and even kind of a background actor have this kind of consistent relationship throughout their careers. And of course, I would be remiss to not talk about Polly Holliday, who plays the absolutely vile Miss Deagle. Now, as a kid, I didn't quite comprehend why she was evil or that she was evil. I would say that Polly Holliday's performance here is on par with Imelda Staunton's fantastic work in the Harry Potter movies as Dolores Umbridge. So just kind of set your barometer for that, because you're going to hate this woman by the time we get to her house full of cats. Just emotionally clock yourself there and get ready, because I don't think I can adequately prepare you for how awful of a person she is. So yes, I think that's enough to say about Gremlins for now. It's a fantastic movie that is just a genre piece, is a lot of fun, and Joe Dante is clearly at the top of his game here, mixing and matching multiple genres, but truly making a love letter to horror, but also setting it at Christmas and making it impossible to divorce from what makes a Christmas movie a Christmas movie. I truly love Joe Dante and his filmography, but Gremlins is always going to have my heart for that early nostalgia hit that I had with it, as well as just the fantastic continual work that this film continues to do and how well it ages, how much deeper it gets over time. And that's why I absolutely had to make sure Gremlins made it on the list to cover this year. It's a fantastic movie, and it's a fantastic Christmas movie, and I can't wait to see what you think after this. Whether this is your first time checking out Gremlins or you've seen it a million times, I hope that I have guided you into appreciating it just a little bit more than you would have otherwise. Regardless, thank you for joining us yet again here at Movie Club. I'll be back next week with yet another holiday hit. Probably not horror next time, but we'll see. Thank you for joining us, and yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Oh, and as always, I'm your host and curator around these parts, Patrick Smith, and this is Movie Club. My hat is like literally just going up my head the entire episode. It's gonna be like up here by the time we're done. You know, sweet dreams, people. I'll see you at the movies. That's the final line. Okay, real quick, everyone. I forgot to put this in the episode, so I'm going to do this right here. Yes, I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. When I was a kid, when I would watch the movie, I don't know if it was just suggestion of the name, the title card popping up at the right time, but I always thought they had recorded a separate version of that classic song, Baby, or Christmas, Baby Please Come Home. I always thought that instead of Christmas, it was like Gremlins. So I recorded my own version of it, and I'm about to play for you right now with my altered child version of the lyrics. So Merry Christmas, everyone. Here we go. Let me make a fool of myself real quick. Coming down, Gremlins. I'm watching it fall, Gremlins. Lots of people around. Baby, please come home, Gremlins. The church bells in town, they're singing a song, Gremlins. Lots of happy sounds. Baby, please come home. They're singing Deck the Halls. But it's not like Christmas at all. I remember when you were here, all the fun we had last year. Pretty lights on the tree, I'm watching it shine. You should be here with me. Baby, please come home. Baby, please. Oh, baby, please. They're singing Deck the Halls, but it's not like Christmas at all.